Hello and welcome to Reimagine version 14.0 University Edition. If this is your first time joining us, welcome in. And if not, thanks for tuning back in. We've interviewed over 600 projects, teams, and thought leaders in the space. And the goal of our virtual conference is to educate and inform everybody, including those new to the crypto space, longtime holders, and industry professionals. So make sure you subscribe below to keep staying informed and enjoy what we have in store for you today. And coming to you today, we have the Chief Technology Officer of both Bitfinex and Tether, Mr. Paolo Ardoino. How are you doing, Paolo? It's an honor to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move into introducing the student panelists, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your career and how you got involved with Bitfinex and Tether and all.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. So I really love the work that you guys are doing around education. So I feel like that's the biggest gap that we are facing today. I have experience in Lugano. I see that that is a small city in Switzerland. I see that in El Salvador, that is of course country in Central South America, and everywhere I go, also in Italy, right? I have ton of experience there, and saddening, but also it makes me think that we have, if the state of the industry is, or if this industry grew so much with this type of miseducation, with the right type of education, this industry is going to take over and revolutionize for real the entire financial system as it should be. So I'm glad that this has to start from everywhere, right? So from students, from professors, right? So I think the ability of professors to renovate themselves is critical. Sometimes takes a little bit of time, right? So usually, I mean, at least speaking on my side, in Italy, I have seen professors always trying to not be on the cutting edge technologies. And so I'm glad that I'm seeing today something extremely different here that proves that there is an evolution in the educational space. That's the only way we are going to make it. But myself, I entered in Bitcoin 2012, 2013. Always, so I'm a developer since I was age 8. I grew up in a small town in Italy, and always was passionate about privacy and encryption, and then peer-to-peer applications. Worked for a few years as a researcher in my university for communication systems for battlefields. Then moved to finance. Created my startup in London. Then was looking at Bitcoin already. Was around 2013. Got excited about Bitcoin. I met Giancarlo, our CFO, decided to actually start winding down my company and fully focus on Bitfinex, because on the technology side, Bitfinex had needed a lot of care, a lot of help. And so completely devoted myself to that one. And then moved to Tether. Started working also for Tether and as basically security, to take care of the security part of all the rollouts of all the different blockchains. Yeah, that's me.
So a little bit of different roles on each, but I do agree, and I think overall everybody agrees that we are on the cutting edge in terms of the education, and there is a lot of misinformation anytime you're on the cutting edge of pretty much any groundbreaking new technology. So being one of those loud voices is very important to us, and we're very excited that you're here with us today. But as I mentioned before, this is our university edition, and our focus in this edition was to invite student blockchain partners to come ask questions and discuss groundbreaking new technologies with some of the most influential thought and business leaders in the industry. So our company, MouseBelt, has been working with more than 80 student blockchain organizations from universities spanning multiple continents, providing support in a variety of ways, from internships, office hours, sponsorships, as well as early stage projects investment. And I have joining us some of that next generation for our discussion today. We have Francesca Bercasio from VCU Blockchain. She's the president up there, and Mr. William Wood. He's a member of the governance and business committees up there. He used to be the head of governance up at Cambridge Blockchain Society. Francesca, if you go ahead and go first, could you tell us a little bit about your club, how many members? We did some of this earlier, but the backgrounds of the majors, I know you were telling us are swapping, and some of the involvements that the club has gotten in, both previously and maybe in the future. And then we'll move on to Cambridge.
Yeah, thank you again. Very nice seeing you, Paolo. Yeah, so we are again VCU Blockchain based in Richmond, Virginia. We just started out last year in 2021, so we're relatively small. We are an interdisciplinary club. Trying to expand more on that, we really try and target students focused in business, engineering, and arts. And we do this because VCU, our university, is a very big public university full of very diverse students. And we want to welcome all of these ideas and all of this talent. We are ranked one of the top schools in our state as well, in arts as well. So there's so many talented artists there, I think, that could benefit from the space and the new creator economy that's emerging. But of course, we want to, give focus and bring the world of stablecoins, DeFi to business and finance students, as well as smart contracts, programmability, security, all of that cool stuff to the engineering students as well. So we really think that this, at least what I try and push at the club is that, this industry is so broad when you really dive down deep into it, and that it will impact almost every aspect of our lives. And we're still very, very early. And I really appreciate Paolo's efforts in trying to, expand this education to students, because they are the new generation. A lot of companies these days, they are not hiring, they're going to be looking more towards Web 2 senior roles. But what if we were to create Web 3 blockchain native students, right? So I think it's in the best incentives that, we focus on this at the campus level. And that's what we really aim to do here in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah, definitely putting those people in those roles will make the transition inevitable. So as I said before, we also have Mr. William Wood from Cambridge Blockchain Society. William, pleasure to have you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys, for having me on. Thank you very much, Paolo, for coming on as well. So I'm from CBS, that's Cambridge Blockchain Society. We have about 1,000 members currently on our Discord and mailing list. We exist primarily, I would say, as a talent hub between, to connect both Cambridge students and alumni with the Web3 world, and a lot of these really interesting tech startups and that sort of thing. Yeah, we do educational lectures, and we send our students to conferences all around the world. So we're super keen on getting more of our people and more of your people together. And yeah, I do governance and biz dev, so hopefully I'll be going around all these protocols and having a look, and we'll hopefully be expanding this year. So it's looking to be one of our biggest yet. Thanks, guys.
Right. Long runway out there in Cambridge, but it sounds exciting. We'll go right back to you, Will, with the first question. But just because it's one side or the other's question, don't hesitate. If either of y'all have a follow-up, go right on ahead. I might jump in with a follow-up, but I'll try not to step on anybody's feet. So go right on ahead, Will.
Okay, great. That's brilliant. Thank you, guys. So my first question was actually about DeFi. So this is from the CBS committee. It's we'd like to know, Paolo, your opinion on, so although cryptocurrency adoption has exploded over the past 2 years, the majority of activity still remains on centralized exchanges, that is like massive volumes on platforms such as Binance, Coinbase, and that sort of thing, FTX especially. What do you think it will take for decentralized finance to become the norm? Do you ever see it, the majority of activity moving on chain, or do you see this trustless exchange having a sort of future?
So there is a lot to unpack here, right? So on one side, there is the technology aspects where you have a blockchain that is programmable. So you have smart contracts, and you can build a lending platform, for example, on a blockchain. So super cool. But then on the other side, you have the regulatory aspects, right? So regulators are looking more and more at DeFi, and they are interested to start regulating DeFi. So we have to define or decide what are the pros of DeFi, right? So why people are excited to use it. And I understand, right? So there are two reasons to use DeFi. First of all, trustless exchange. Second is non-KYC/privacy, right? So I think that in the next 2 years, we are going to see the non-KYC/privacy to be a non-feasible opportunity more. So we are going to see regulators asking for the same levels of KYC and AML that centralized exchanges are offering. And hence you remain with non-custodial, right, fully on-chain aspects. But there is an issue there, right? So the issue is performance. So blockchains are not performant, right? So they are extremely low performance databases. So what happens there is that what you could do is, and we as Bitfinex demonstrated that a couple of times, both with, especially with Ethereum, we created a decentralized custody plus centralized exchange, where you could benefit from an order matching engine that could process hundreds of thousands of operations per second, but still rely or give the customers full control of their assets on chain. So, because the issue that I see with DeFi, and I would love, honestly, I feel like I'm more part of the underground rather than the foreground, right? So I would love to see, you know, I like to imagine technology to be available in a post-apocalyptic world where you need to be prepared for the worst, right? So I'm a big fan of Asimov. I'm a big fan of you know, all the sci-fi movies and books. And so I like to think about technologies that can be used no matter what type of incredible apocalyptic scenario will happen. But and you know, that is the technology. But then there is the technology in the real world use cases, right? So if there are major problems, then we can go back to using the technology as it is. You know, because we are really living in the worst scenario, right? But then if you are living in a, say, more normal world, then you need to use technology that is fast, that is people don't like to wait, right? So they need speed, they need consistency, and they might need self-custody. So the point is that, to me, DeFi is great, but if you start adding the fact that you need KYC, and then you start adding that you know, you start at the same time working on centralized exchanges that allow non-custodial assets, then the balance between CeFi and DeFi becomes harder to gauge. So I must say that, and also the problem is that now even blockchains are having terrible performances, even with the low usage that we have, right? So because Ethereum fees skyrocket, Solana goes down every 2 days, basically, and so many issues, and there is no mass adoption yet. So what if there was a mass adoption? So how we expect that these blockchains can keep up? So the reality is that there are two solutions to me. Sorry for the long rambling, but the first one is centralized exchanges or centralized products that can leverage performance with non-custodial aspects. The second one is peer-to-peer. So if you want to go to get to the real scale, you have to go peer-to-peer, where, you know, now we are living in a world where the fastest layer 1 solution claims to have 50,000 transactions per second. So if you think about it, there is an important aspect to that, right? To that limit. So how many transactions per second we think that a layer 1 platform can achieve. The issue there is that most of these platforms, of these layer one blockchains, have a shared global state. It means that, William, if your fridge is buying some milk for you, because nowadays fridges can buy milk for you, if they see that the milk is finished in your fridge, then they need to do on-chain transactions. So everyone in the world will see that you are buying some milk. Maybe they will not see that it's milk, but they see that someone sent that transaction. Imagine when so you might have seen Elon Musk with his Tesla robot. You see Boston Dynamics, you see Asimov from Honda, right? And plus you see artificial intelligence. So, and Internet of Things. If you unify artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, robotics, we will live in 10 to 20 years in a world that will see robots as part of our day-to-day life. And robots are going to do transactions, right? So they buy stuff, right? So they will purchase things on behalf of the humans, right? So you need a scalability that is 10 million transactions per second, probably 50 million transactions per second, because robots will be smarter, will be faster, right? So, and will need, low friction transactions, right? They don't like to lose time. So what happens there is that the only way to achieve that is peer-to-peer. So Lightning is an example, but you can build similar toolings like Lightning on different blockchains even. But the point is that if I want to buy some milk, then that transaction should stay between myself and the grocery store, right? Not the entire world should see that, because then having everyone seeing all the transactions will incur in the limit of the speed of light. So right now, for example, that's also the reason why you cannot bring down the block time to below a certain extent, because the speed of light, for example, if you send a transaction or a packet, a datagram from Paris to Japan, it might take 150 milliseconds. So if you have a block time of 400 milliseconds, you cannot afford to not have a perfect internet, because otherwise your node will fall out of sync. So that will completely jeopardize the entire blockchain. Long story short, I think we need better solutions, and we need slower layer ones. That is fine to be as low layer one, but you need to be able to build capable layer 2 solutions on top of it.
I know that Francesca had something maybe to follow up, or I think you had something just about privacy and regulation in general, if you wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, it's really, I come from more of a financial background, but this is, I think, security and I guess the load on the blockchain really matters if you really want this to be adopted. I see your work with Hole Punch and Keat. Really excited for the mobile version, so definitely following up on that. I do want to shift to the discussion more on stablecoins, because it's what I'm kind of like focusing a little more on now from a fintech perspective. And I had the question pertaining to regulation. So as we are going towards less privacy and stricter regulation, and probably you could argue an overbreach in privacy, how much can Tether do before they can be forced into action? How much can they do before they're deemed unethical and unjust by the people, right? From my perspective and how I'm seeing this is that governments are going to be more, they're going to have more of an incentive to overreach on, privacy and go more into people's lives. There's this discussion with CBDCs, but I see stablecoins also being, in the way of that as well. So just curious to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So this is an extremely interesting topic as well, right? So also touches on one of my other preferred aspects, that is the possible apocalyptic future or Orwellian future. You never know what will happen first. So to me, stable coins are, should be categorized, but the reality is that the only one that work and are proven are the centralized stable coins. So Tether never hide itself behind a finger, right? So we are a centralized stable coin and we have to comply with the regulations. So Tether have been working with regulators and law enforcement agencies all around the world, with no exception. So we have been, as part of the work, so right now Tether is participating and helping in 60 different parallel investigations. So to me is, we use a bank, right? So we use banks, so we use the standard banking channels. So to us, it is really important to maintain a good relationship with both regulators and our community. But I think that there is a balance, right? So we have proven that we stand up for our community. A few days ago, there was the Binance Smart Chain hack, right? That was one of the biggest hacks in the history of, probably the biggest one in the history of DeFi at least. And you know what? After 15 minutes that Tether was notified, it was able to freeze $8 million, 8 million USDT, as part of that were stolen by the hackers. So that's how you give back to your community. So Tether was able to give back around 210 million plus to legitimate owners that were subject to hacks, scams, and so on, working with law enforcement and acting under a clear regulatory process. So definitely, you know, stable coins cannot be like the Wild West, or cannot be pirates, right? They are using the standard rails of finance. But I think like there is, when it comes to privacy, there are solutions, right? So if you want to be, so there are spectrums. Tether is no Bitcoin. I always said that. You might have heard me in Lugano as well, right? So Tether is not meant to be a replacement for Bitcoin. Tether is centralized, right? So Tether aims to, Tether doesn't even want to replace banks. Doesn't want to replace banks in the US, or doesn't want to replace banks in Europe. But the crazy part about the business model of Tether is that there are 2 billion people in the world that are unbanked, and because just banks gave up on them. Banks cannot make money on that type of population, and they are all using Tether. So that's the, also those type of our audience is not afraid of you know, having a regulator asking us about things, because the way they use Tether is just a lifeline to save themselves from the high inflation from Turkey, from Argentina, Venezuela, and so on. And on the other side, so on one side you have Tether, that is just $1 on a blockchain. On the other side you have Bitcoin. So if you want to have like the highest independency, you should always go to Bitcoin, no matter what. No debate there. If you want, and you are subject to volatility, that is fine. I like that. I like the fact that you know, I hold Bitcoin, and in the future I'm really bullish on what Bitcoin represents, and so I know that the value will go up, at least in my opinion, right? On the other side, you have Tether is a stable coin, it's just a surrogate of the dollar. So they offer 2 different use cases. But yes, I think that I'm okay. I'm actually interested to see, and now that I'm more and more involved with you know, discussions with the regulators and with law enforcement, I see how it operates, and I see how they are excited. Sometimes they are scratching their head, because they are used to the banking system, where the banking system, you send them an email, it's, you know, Saturday, there is no one, like you hear crickets, right? So no, if if they need to act, it takes 10 days in the banking industry, while we can actually help our customers within few minutes from the notification after we verify that the claim is correct, and we can do the same thing with law enforcement.
Yeah, I had I'll follow up on that, because that's really interesting, especially because I always study more Bitcoin than anything. there seems to be, especially on Twitter, in the Bitcoin space, there seems to be like a mainstream thought that Bitcoin will become the world's reserve currency, probably on Lightning, as we see with these technologies. So I'm curious about your view on that, given that Tether is giving people access to the dollar and the dollar is already the world's reserve currency.
So that's another interesting point, because to me, Bitcoin can become the world reserve currency. So it won't happen from one day to another, right? So, the dollar has a few hundred years of history, and, money has always been centralized, right? So in one way or another. So from the times of the Romans, right? So they were like, you had the conio that was like creating the coins and gold, silver, and so on, right? Also, Romans were, I think, the ones that created inflation, because they started adding over time a little bit of iron, to decrease the quantity of precious metal that was in the coins. But eventually, but this was, I think that the moment we saw the US issuing 36 to 38% of the total US dollars in 2 years, definitely that is the thing that makes me realize that it will take time, because it will take a ton of time, but Bitcoin will become the reserve currency of the world, because that is, at least, will become a reserve currency of the world, right? So it shouldn't be one or the other. I mean, also the beauty is in diversity, right? So I think that is important, but it's important to have another reserve currency of the world, where people, in worst case scenario, in the apocalyptic scenario that I was describing, can put their money in.
I know that Francesca had stated at the beginning of all of that something about Keat. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what Keat is exactly, because I'm unfamiliar.
Sure. So that is actually one of my preferred topics. So I'm a big supporter of the concept of individual sovereignty. That is not like anarchy or stuff, right? So it means that a person should be free, full stop. And means that in order to be free, you need to be able to have financial freedom, and freedom of speech. So if you have only financial freedom, but you cannot say anything, right? So you are always kept under scrutiny. You are always, let's say, tied by the government. I'm not talking about maybe some Western governments, but more like, keep in mind that the world is full of governments that are not happy of people actually speaking up. And on the other side, if you have only freedom of speech, but you don't have a financial freedom, you can say what you want, but you can eventually, you cannot, if you say the wrong thing, you cannot spend your money because it's tied to a bank account, right? So imagine a government where you send out a tweet, and the government will say, well, your money is frozen until you delete that tweet, right? So it's kind of Orwellian, but it's not that crazy. So to me, the most important part is fulfilling the vision that we had, or that started with Bitcoin. And so we created a platform called Hole Punch. The way, in simple terms, I think that if you are familiar with BitTorrent as a technology, BitTorrent, of course, if you remember the history of file sharing applications, you would remember that before BitTorrent, there were many others. There was LimeWire, there was Nutella, and Napster. Of course, Napster. The younger generations might not recall all of them, but it took a longer time to develop or to come with BitTorrent, right? lot of slaps on the wrists were given in order to arrive to BitTorrent. And the reason why BitTorrent is still with us today is that is really decentralized. There are no central servers, right? So it uses three technologies, and one is DHT, distributed hash table. That is like a distributed database, a key value store database among multiple peers. So the DHT, so this distributed database, reached a peak of 20 million nodes at the peak of BitTorrent usage. So it really proved the concept. Second technology was swarming. Swarming is a technology, if you remember BitTorrent, right? The more people had access or had a file, the faster it got. The faster was for others to download it, because it could download different chunks of the file in parallel from multiple people. The third technology was and is hole punching. Hole punching is a technique that allows two peers to create a direct connection, or two computers, two devices, to establish a direct connection among themselves without any central server. The way I say it is that, people, well, let's finish about that, right? So basically, my thought a few years ago was, why we don't take BitTorrent technology, and is now limited only to static files. But what if we could take the very same technology and use it for data streams, live data streams? So what we are having now in this chat is a live data stream of video, audio, and well, possibly text, right? So basically that is hole punch. The product is a framework, it is an SDK that unify all those technologies, improve BitTorrent underlying technology, and is making it available to create applications like Kit. Kit is a peer-to-peer video text application and fully peer-to-peer. It's basically Zoom without central servers. The biggest lie is that in order for us to communicate, we would need we need a central server. That is a lie, because we are going to Mars, right? We have the technology to go to Mars, and yet we think that we need someone else's servers to communicate. That's not true, right? So internet and your devices, each of our devices, are more than capable to serve, to download really big files, to serve high quality content, to store stuff, and crunch enormous quantity of data without having any problems. And yet we are, we have been taught that cloud is our friend. To me, cloud is not our friend. Cloud is, sorry to say this, but to me is a scam. So in the sense that thinking that we have been since Facebook in early 2000s, right? So we were always pushed to think that cloud was our friendly mate that was helping us to, store our files and chat and photos, because we were too dumb to, to do it ourselves, or to come up with a solution that would allow us to retain control over our own stuff. Because it's not that data centers are nice, are a good thing in general, right? They can serve multiple purposes, but the simple fact that we are pushed, or we feel we don't stop and think that all our files are sitting on someone else's server in a jurisdiction that is not our home jurisdiction. That data can be weaponized and against us, against our government, and so on, right? So, for example, I'm Italian. Imagine all the Italians producing all the content and sitting on a, I don't know, French server, right, or French data center. Now everything is moved, but in the past wasn't, right? History should always teach us that things are not stable forever. And so I'm not advocating for things going bad, of course, but I'm just saying that people should think about that things are not always going in the right direction. And data can be weaponized So French could use Italians people data to whip against Italy, for example, right? You know what people like, you know everything about that, right? So is going to be, that is something that is extremely scary to me. And the fact that we are using, we never develop solutions that are actually allowing people to keep control over their own data is the biggest problem ever. So Keet is a great example, right? So you go on Keet.io, Keet.io, you download a file, you download an application. It will come to mobile. It is in a couple of months, probably less. Now it's just for desktop. So you start it, and basically you can jump in a room and start a video call with up to 25 to 50 people now. We will have also the text rooms, can be thousands of people. It's like a Telegram and Zoom replacement without a single central server. Let me tell you what is the beauty of it. That the entire experience that you are seeing now, right, on Zoom, right? So all these like, you know, our faces, you know, coordination, chat, and whatever, was developed by one single front-end developer with, you know, classic React.js, that is one of the classic programming, classic frameworks that you would use for the web, in 6 months. So one single person worked for 6 months and created Zoom competitor using a hole punch technology behind. That will be fully open source. So why is that? Because the beautiful part of what we are doing, I think, is that now, if in the normal development space, no developer will ever create a competitor of Zoom, because they know that it would cost tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars per year in data center costs. So you have to find a VC or multiple VCs. Is getting crazy. Imagine a world where every single web developer can actually build applications that are competing with Zoom, Gmail, Google Drive, and whatsoever, without a single central server, all peer-to-peer. Yes, you can have decentralized storage. We are working on that. We are going to add that. But that's it, right? So people should be paid, or data centers should be paid for keeping copies of encrypted data, rather than using the data of people to generate tens of billions in revenues per year. So that's the future. And by the way, that is what Web 1 was about. Web 1, when was created as a way for people to host content, to create, to share content, to share knowledge, right? Was never meant to be centralizing in 3 huge companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. So I think that what we are doing is simply going back to the roots of internet and its aim and its ethos.
It's very, very exciting, because I was there at Web 1, and I did have an Angel Fire site at one time when they gave you free web hosting, and the internet was always supposed to be free. So we'll toss it out to Cambridge and Mr. Wood if you've got anything to follow up, or just take it a different direction.
Oh, that would be great. I mean, the weaponization of data, that's a really interesting discussion, and it's one that I'd love to hear more about. But if it's okay, I'd like to ask you a question about the weaponization of currencies, actually. So personally, I actually wrote my dissertation in my final year on CBDCs in China. And so I'd like to ask your opinion on what do you think is the future for, let's say, traditionally centralized stablecoins such as USDC and Tether, when you're facing potential, you know, state-funded research of CBDCs, and what do you think about that?
So I have 2 considerations here. One, first of all, I think that CBDCs and as you know, CBDCs are actually using Tether's technology, right? Tether created the entire stablecoin market in 2014. So you have to be either annoyed with us or happy with us that we created this entire thing, this entire industry. So CBDCs are and it can be seen in 2 ways. First of all, they can be this overreaching tool for governments. And actually in the US, someone at Congress tried to create a bill to ban the possibility of the government to create a CBDC to avoid that state control. But it's also true that CBDCs could be seen in a different light. That could be that So the entire financial industry is kept together, traditional financial industry is kept together by rubber and bands, right? The entire technology in finance is 30 years old. So that's one of the reasons why there are huge costs in running financial infrastructure, right? Is COBOL, is really old databases. If you look at HSBC, one of the biggest banks in the world, the website feels like you're still living in the 2002 year, right? So that's it, because it is so big, is so monolithic that is almost impossible to change. And so every year they are piling up new functionalities, and that costs more and more to maintain. And that cost is passed to users. That's why banking is in such a big trouble as well. But imagine a future where, and also if banks have this interbanking settlement system, so they are settling money among themselves. But what if, in my opinion, CBDCs should be that interbanking settlement blockchain, private blockchain. There is nothing wrong with that, right? So it would be bringing them to the latest technology really fast. And of course, will take time to move to blockchains and switch off the old system, but they can do in parallel, right? You start moving, you bring up like an internal private CBDC that is just a settlement layer for banks, top tier and second tier banks. And basically all the banks will be connected there, and they will just do the normal operations, but on a faster, more reliable technology layer. That is one way to see it. The other way is to see it is, okay, the real question is, are private citizens being targeted by CBDCs? So is the private citizen going to hold a token from a CBDC? If the answer is yes, I think is extremely problematic. If the answer is no, is a great idea. And also the second point that I want to make is that it's really unlikely that the government, the US government or any other government will issue on Ethereum, Solana, on all these blockchains, right? So they will never take the risk on issuing there, right? Because they don't want to go through the proof of work, proof of stake debate, right? This is not how governments work. So I think that CBDCs and privately issued stablecoins will keep existing. But I also want to make another point. So I was in a panel with one of the heads of the Bank of Japan a couple of weeks ago on CBDCs. And he said something, a really intelligent thing that I didn't think about. So someone asked him if the Bank of Japan was going to be interested to create a CBDC. And he said, no, because there is a big issue. With cash, so certain governments are trying to make CBDCs looking like cash. So CBDCs that can be held by private citizens, they are trying to make it look like cash. But cash has a specific function or a specific feature. Cash doesn't give you interest, but also cash doesn't give you or charge you negative interest. For example, in Switzerland, you have a negative interest, right? So what happens there is that if a government start replacing all the cash with CBDCs, what can happen is that they might not be able to enforce negative interest. And because, well, unless they change their mind, of course, governments can change their mind, but citizens will be really pissed in that case. Imagine if a government tells you, okay, we are replacing cash with this thing that give us more control, but we will not charge any negative interest or positive interest. You can use it. But eventually, if you don't charge negative interest, or if you charge it and you change your mind, people are going to get really into a rebellion. Because with cash, they never had that issue, right? If you hold $100, every day you wake up is $100 in your hand. There is inflation for sure and so on. But if you have bank account, every day you are accruing a negative interest and you get charged for it. So it's really hard for a central bank to be so forward-looking and understand what the next 10 to 20 years will bring or will will require from them. And so the decision of creating a CBDC is extremely difficult for a central bank. So what is happening now, although each bank is talking about CBDCs, but having talked to many central banks, the reality of things is that for the moment, they just don't want to fall behind their neighbors. So they want to say that they are creating this pilot, but they are not extremely serious to put into fruition.
Well, really quickly, I do know we got a little bit of time left. I do know that Ms. Bercasio, and my opinion is the same, by the way, in terms of that CBDC. I think it's just a little bit of fluff to please what's going on right now. I believe Ms. Bercasio might have had something, a burning desire just to finish this up here.
Yeah. I guess like I'll skip to my last question, and kind of an interesting question. Frank Chaparro asked on a panel I was at I attended in Converge, is that what do you think is the most overrated thing in blockchain and crypto right now?
First of all, I really like Frank, super brilliant journalist, and most overrated thing. Probably that's a tough question. I would say the potential of blockchain is extremely overrated. So has a lot of features, but people are trying to use it for also making coffee.
Like a buzzword, like people you think are just putting blockchain on everything and profiting or getting more attention off that word. Okay. Exactly,
because I think that people are using blockchains for the wrong thing. Again, you shouldn't use blockchains for making games, right? So if you are imagining, and probably you never played to that, but the World of Warcraft, right? That is like a massive game. So how do we expect current blockchains to keep up with that? So we got back to the peer-to-peer concept. So but it creates money, right? So VCs it's like in the year 2000, right? There was like the internet bubble. And at that time, there was a company, like a telephone company in Italy, that went up 1,000 times because it was the first company to offer internet services. And then went back in 1 year to where it was, right? So because of course there was a ton of competition and was like overly hyped. So we have to distinguish between Bitcoin and blockchains. So Bitcoin is a currency, is an idea, is a ethos. Blockchain is extremely overrated. It's a great tool. One of the, as I was saying, as an interbanking settlement system, or just a way to provide transparency to transactions. So many things, because you cannot change, ideally, you cannot change a blockchain. But it also has a limited set of use cases.
So definitely no reason for a blockchain of things, it's let's keep it where it needs to be. So, well, we've kind of run out of time here. So I want to say thank you to my co-panelists, Ms. Francesca Bercasio from Virginia Commonwealth and Mr. William Wood out in Cambridge. And of course, a great honor to have Mr. Paolo Ardoino, the CTO of Bitfinex and Tether on with us. So thank everybody. I want to thank everybody here for coming out today. It was a great discussion. Thank you all.